the state of the college football regular season. We're saying, JD, it's June. I mean, we got a ways to go here. I know Media Days is around the corner and we're fired up. We're psyched about it. If we're a real sicko, I know a lot of y'all are. We're watching college football full game reruns on YouTube. But listen, regular season's a ways away. Why are we talking about this? For those of you asking that question, the college football playoff is expanding to 12 teams. And when you tinker with the postseason, it tends to impact the regular season. Remember now, the BCS, if you lost one game during the regular season, it was like, all right, better start praying. You better do everything and anything you can to help your chances to find your way into that national title game as a one-loss team. Not every season, but a lot of seasons. I mean, in 2007, things kind of went a little bit haywire, but I digress. And in the college football playoff era, one loss meant, during the regular season that is, we'll see. You might need a little bit of help, but hey, I wouldn't make any plans just yet for January to be on vacation. May need you. 2 losses meant 99% of the time you're going to be out. We never had a 2-loss team make the 4-team playoff. But even so, 2 losses meant you could probably be in the hunt right around that time where the playoff was going to happen. But again, 2 losses meant more or less you're out. But now, as we move into this new era of the college football playoff, how does that impact our regular season? To me, it means, hey, you lost one game. Don't even sweat it. Why are you worried about losing the game? It's no big deal. You're still going to be in the playoff. You went 11-1. You're from a power conference. Okay, hey, right this way. We'll show you the door. You may not get a bye necessarily, but you're still in the dance. 2 losses. You're like, oh boy, 2 losses? 2 losses meant you're not in the dance. According to that 4-team playoff model, what does it mean for the 12-team playoff? 2 losses, no more. Get on in here. You thought we were going to stop you with 2 losses? No, get on in here. It doesn't matter, especially for the Big Ten and the SEC for the record. Now, 3 losses is where it gets a little bit fuzzy. More often than not, 3 losses during the regular season means you will not be in the playoff. But I'm just going to tell you right now, without a shadow of a doubt, whether it be in this 12-team era and most certainly this 14-team era, we are going to see a 3-loss team make the college football playoff. That's my personal opinion. So the reason why we're talking about this right now and the reason why this needs to be unpacked is because this is going to impact, again, the way that we consume the regular season. College football is still awesome. We'll talk about that more in a second. But what this means with this new playoff structure is that the early part of the season, not the intensity is going to be dialed back, not that they're not still going to be incredible, but the real-time stakes for a lot of these games early on in the year is going to be a little bit less than what we've come to know it as during the better part of this last, couple seasons and quite frankly, last few generations of college football, like Texas, Oklahoma. That game's still going to be intense. Texas and OU don't like each other anymore now they're in the SEC and that we got a 12-team playoff field. They still hate each other's guts and we love you for it. But also there's a very real possibility that either one of those teams, whoever loses, is still going to have their college football playoff hopes alive and still very much so going to have a chance to go 10-2 and be in the dance. Again, doesn't mean that rivalry means any less, but it does mean the real-time stakes of what it means on that day probably a little bit lower. USC at Michigan, they play early in the year. Loser can still make the college football playoff. Okay, so just so we're on the same page here, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter, but it does mean when you look at the postseason, doesn't mean that's a loser go home kind of feel. Now, what I think this also does the regular season, though, is the pressure and intensity that we feel at the end of the regular season, most specifically like rivalry weekend, that pressure isn't going away. It's just going to be distributed a little bit differently across the board. Because the last couple of seasons, we've gone into last weekend of the regular season, see Ohio State, Michigan start rubbing the hands together and say, oh boy, it's a playoff game. It's a playoff game. That's what it is. Whether it's in Ann Arbor, whether it's at Ohio State, that game is a loser go home vibe to it. Now, that pressure, while the absolute value is still there, we're just taking it from that game specifically and going to distribute it across maybe 4 to 5 to 6 other games. So while that game still means a lot, it's a lot less of loser go home and a lot more winner gets in kind of vibe. Like I'm looking at the last week of the season, A&M and Texas. Even if Texas has a spot wrapped up, A&M could still win and get in if they're sitting there at, 9-2. Still going to be an awesome game. The pressure's a little bit less for Texas. They'd still love to keep A&M out, but there's still some stakes there for a team like A&M. Notre Dame at USC. Could see that going either way as well in terms of either of those teams being in the playoff hunt. Stranger things have happened. Oklahoma at LSU. Arkansas, Missouri. What if Missouri needs to win that final game of the season to get in the playoff? It's not necessarily like Arkansas was going to have a chance to make the playoff, but no shade to the good folks out there in Fayetteville. But if Missouri drops that game, are they out? Are they sitting there at 9-2 and losing? They're 9-3 and they're out. But if they win, are they 10-2 and have a chance to get in? Like, you hear what I'm saying? It's not so specific to this is a playoff game, high pressure, high stakes for both sides. We'll see some of that, but I think for the most part, we're going to just take that pressure and distribute it, again, kind of more evenly across the slate when we get to November, especially rivalry weekend. Now, I have been extremely vocal about how I feel about the playoff and extremely vocal about how I feel about the regular season. You and I we have consumed college football the same way for, the last 20-plus years. College football is built on the regular season. The NFL, the NBA, heck, even March Madness, those are all postseason-driven sports, in the sense that the regular season matters as much as you get into the dance, and then you go from there. It's kind of a hit the reset button, new season starts in the postseason. College football, it's like, okay, hey, Florida, you got to beat A&M. It's week 1, but if you lose that game, you're out and you're not making the playoff. In the BCS mold, or heck, in the college football playoff 4-team mold, that's kind of how we used to consume this whole deal. Now, again, that changes where we get more mulligans, there's more margin for error, and so that impacts, again, our regular season. College football is now becoming a more postseason-driven sport when it comes to how we are consuming it and how we're perceiving our teams on a week-to-week basis. But college football, hear me loud and clear, college football is not doomed. College football is not going in the tank. College football is not going to be any less awesome, because what makes college football special to me, the magic, yes, the regular season plays a pretty significant role in that, but the way that you root for your team, if you're a Tennessee fan or you're a Notre Dame fan or you're a LSU fan, you still live and die with your team on Saturday. Like, if you're Tennessee, that game against Alabama, that third Saturday in October, you don't hate Alabama any less just because you could drop that game and still make the playoff. You still want to win that game with every fiber of your being. Your fanhood is still very much so intact. Same thing with Notre Dame whenever they play USC. Even if Notre Dame's got a playoff spot wrapped up, the last thing you want to do is lose to that team. Last thing you want to do. So, you go down the line here for every single college football team, and the fanhood for each and every Saturday is going to be the same. As long as we have fall Saturdays, as they are, where they kick the ball off, whether it be at noon, whether it be at 3:30, whether it be a night game, as long as there is still 110% engagement from the diehards, we're going to be, I think, just fine. We're going to be in good shape. The thing with me is, like, awesome things stand the test of time. Stuff's going to change around it. Stuff is going to change the actual thing we're talking about itself here, which is college football, which is the regular season. But, like, the iPhone's a great example here. The iPhone, for me, is awesome. I think for you as well, if you're watching the show, you more than likely, according to the statistics, have an iPhone. The charger has changed now a few times for that. The port has changed a few times for that. I think they're changing it again. I just had to go get a new phone, and they're telling me, hey, the port's going to change. You got to change your charger, all that. Like, I'm not a fan of that. I liked the old charger. I like being familiar with where things stand with my iPhone. But again, the iPhone's awesome. College football, the regular season, it's still awesome. It's going to stand the test of time. Oreos, they're awesome, right? A lot of studies coming out, hey, this is bad for you. This is bad for you. Don't eat this. Don't eat that. Oreos are still crushing it. Oreos are still, I would have to imagine, one of the top snacks in America. Now, that's another segment for another time, but you hear the sentiment I'm getting behind. College football and fall Saturdays, as long as that's intact, as long as that stays awesome, we're going to be okay. How we perceive the postseason is going to change. The regular season and the stakes for each and every game from a macro level, from a national title picture, those change a little bit. But nobody is not watching Tennessee, Alabama if you're a diehard Bama fan and diehard Tennessee fan, because that game doesn't have the same playoff impact as maybe it did a couple seasons ago. So the state of the college football regular season, it's changing. But as long as the state of college football is awesome, the regular season, as much as I may not like the direction it's headed, still going to be awesome, and we're going to be okay. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.